once we're done today with some different applications we use on other nips, you'll be able to turn this into a zebra. You'll be able to turn it into any number of things. All right, so the other thing that we got to note is, before we get started, is we're going to tie on some relatively large hooks today. The thing with midges is, at least the people in the South would tend to call them a no-see-em, right? The little tiny clouds of bugs that you see floating on the river at different times, that is an adult midge, and we're going to tie the nipple stage of that. So for the Provo River, if you're tying for around here, you're going to want to be no larger than probably a size 20 for this fly, and we're going to tie it on a 14. All right, so I've got my hook set. We're going to start off exactly like we did last week with an overwrap of the hook, 4 or 5 turns of thread, and cut off my tag. Now I'm going to wrap this all the way back. I'm going to wrap the entire shank. Since this is a straight hook, the shank goes to right about this area. That's what's considered anyway. There really are no rules in fly tying whatsoever, just like there are no absolute rules in fly fishing or art or anything like that. Right? But there's standards that most people work around. So we're going to tie right to where it starts to bend down the curve of the hook, and I'm going to stop there. Now before I go much farther, you probably can't see this on the camera, but as I'm winding down this hook, my thread has gone from looking like a thread to looking like a rope. Right? It's very tightly wound. This will happen with every thread you use in fly tying, thread, floss, anything like that. And if you tie as a right-handed tyer, you will always build your thread into a rope. If you tie as a left-handed tyer, your thread will try to flatten out on you, right? Because thread is actually made like rope, so it's got a twist to it. So as I'm tying right-handed, that twist is getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and it'll get to a point where the threads will want to lay down like cylinders next to each other and give a rough look. Sometimes we want that, most of the time we don't. So you'll see me a lot of times as I set my thread down, I will sit here and I'll give it a reverse spin as I reach for the next tool or material, and that is to get that added twist out of it. As you're tying nips, you'll find that thread management is more important than it is in a lot of other flies. If we end up with that rope-like thread or too many wraps and tying down materials, we'll get a nip that's way out of proportion. In the beginning, you'll have trouble trying to figure out why that is. Smaller the fly, the more important it is to manage that thread. So I've tied to the back, and this is the easiest fly you're ever going to learn. So tied to the back, and I'm going to tie in a piece of wire. We're going to use the same pinch wrap that John was teaching everybody last time we met, where I'm going to lay my wire right on top of the hook shank, bring my thread up so it goes between my thumb and forefinger, pinch it between my fingers, bring it around the hook, and then pull it tight out of my fingers, just so that it stays where I want it to stay. Now I'm going to give it 3 or 4 wraps back up the hook and cut my tag end off. Now for a standard thread midge, especially if you're down below size 20, the next step is all you're going to do is wrap that color back to the head and stop. That is the fly, before we add the rib. There's no bulk to it. If you've looked at midge larvae coming out of the river, they basically look like an elongated mouse turd. Right? There's no taper to them, nothing like that. Once they start hatching, you'll start ending up with things around the head, peacock herl, beads, things like that. Right? But for a basic thread midge, all we do is wrap our underbody and then back to the front, no more bulk than that. So I'm going to come back to the front, leaving room to build a head, and then I'm going to take my wire. I always wrap wire the opposite direction of whatever the previous layer was. Makes everything a little bit, lets the wire act as a reinforcement. So I'm going to tie it off, 2 wraps. Now I can cut my wire clean and build it. We were talking about the rope-like consistency of the thread. As you build a head and you find that a lot of times it'll keep wanting to slide forward, not do exactly what you want it to do, untwist that thread slightly and you'll find it to be more cooperative.
What number of thread are you using? 8?
I think it's an 8. This one hasn't been off the bobbin in a long time. And then I'm going to go and just add my whip finish. This is a different style of whip finisher. This is what I learned on. It has a spring arm right here. Works exactly the same as the Renzetti type that we showed you last week. The Renzettis are more common. That's what you're going to find more in the fly shops. But if you do come across one of these, that's what it is a whip finisher. And I use both styles, just depending on temperament that day.
That's a Thompson style.
That's right. In fact, I think that one actually came with my first Thompson kit about 30 years ago. Trim it off, and we're done. That is a thread midge. Now, a couple variations. If I want to make a zebra midge, which essentially just imitates a slightly farther along life cycle of the midge, as the midge is starting to crawl out of the pupal sac, right? If you look at this versus the zebra midge has much more taper to it. So the zebra midge, what we would do is add a bead, which we'll cover later today. Add a bead first for the head, and then instead of a single wrap down and back, normally the zebra midge is down and back, down to the 3, we split our remaining hook into 4 areas. So we're going to go down and back, then we're going to go down to the 3/4 point and back, down to the halfway point and back, down to the 1/4 point and back, wrap our wire up and tie off behind the bead head, and that's a zebra midge. Midges are probably one of the most important things to have in your box, and luckily they're one of the easiest things to tie to put in your box.